Je déclare la réunion.
Good day, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 47 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. First, I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Pursuant to the order of reference adopted by the House on Tuesday, May 31st, 2022, the committee is meeting on the study of Bill C-18, an act respecting online communications platforms that make news content available to persons in Canada. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of witnesses and members. 1. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. 2. Interpretation for those on Zoom. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. And those in the room, of course, you can use the earpiece to select your desired channel. The chair is in French today, so I think the interpreters will have a little bit more work today. And another reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. In accordance with our routine motion, I am informing the committee that all witnesses have completed the required connection test in advance of the meeting. I would now like to greet and welcome, first of all, our new committee members, but also our witnesses for today. From the Alberta Weekly Newspapers Association, Evan Jamieson, President and Vice President of Manufacturing at Great West Media, and Dennis Merrill, Executive Director. From the Canadian Association of Broadcasters, Kevin Desjardins, President. From Channel Zero, Cal Miller, President, and Greg O'Brien, News Director at CHCH-TV. From Le Devoir, Brian Miles, Editor. From Google Canada, Colin McKay, Head of Public Policy and Government Relations. And from Reset, Ben Scott, Director, appearing by video conference. Each organization represented will have 5 minutes to give a speech at the beginning of the meeting. And we will begin right away with the Alberta Weekly Newspaper Association. Mr. Jamieson or Mr. Merrill, you can go ahead for 5 minutes. Over to you.
The opportunity to appear before the committee today. I'm Evan Jamieson, the president of the Alberta Weekly Newspapers Association. I'm the third generation of my family in the newspaper business, and also the third generation to sit as the president of our provincial newspaper association. Our association represents all but a few of the community newspapers in Alberta. Today, we've come to advocate on behalf of those businesses, often considered to be the lifeblood of the communities they serve. The passage of C-18 is important to the media landscape in Canada and can help shore up declining revenues at many newspapers, especially the larger ones. There is, however, significant concern amongst our membership regarding the level of support it will deliver to smaller publishers. We have heard encouraging reports out of Australia regarding deals signed by publishers of all sizes. However, there's a lot of secrecy around those deals and the level of support being provided to any given news outlet. The Office of the Parliamentary Budget Officer recently released a report estimating that revenues gained under C-18 could provide 30% of the cost of creating news content. This is encouraging, and we would advocate that 30% is likely the minimum amount needed to have a meaningful impact at most news operations. However, it is unclear where the 30% estimate the PBO used came from, as it was based on unspecified available information. We also wonder how this 30% will be achieved, depending on which platforms are forced to negotiate. It appears to many that Meta is avoiding new deals with news outlets and is working its way out of hosting news content in general. What happens to the 30% if Meta isn't involved? Does Google pay the full 30? Is the 30% assumption even accurate? Or should this be some sort of a mandated target? We must also keep in mind that the digital world and platforms are constantly evolving. It is difficult to say which platforms and technologies will be dominant into the future. Governments and private lawsuits around the world are challenging the major platforms out of concerns around anti-competitive practices, privacy, and misinformation. How do we support small news operations that do not meet the qualification of a qualified Canadian journalism operation? There are many independent publishers, often family-run, in print and online, that will be left out of C-18. We need to find ways to support these news outlets. They are often the only source of news in the communities they serve. As has been pointed out in previous hearings, there is no single solution to support all news outlets. The business models and scale which they operate vary greatly. What may work at a national scale with broad audiences will not necessarily work in a small town with a limited pool of interested readers. The situation is dire for many news outlets. Some would blame this on an inability to adapt. Too often we get described as legacy or dinosaurs married to the old way of doing things. This isn't the case. Many operators are experimenting with different business models and different business and distribution models. Newspapers have long been early adopters of technology, from the advent of computers, desktop publishing, email, PDFs, digital cameras, robotics, and artificial intelligence. We are not afraid of technology. The problem is that there isn't a clear path to success in today's digital world, especially for smaller local publishers. Good journalism takes time, is expensive to produce, and is ephemeral. Simply regurgitating news releases isn't enough. We must rebuild and strengthen news outlets that have been decimated by years of revenue declines. We need to not only preserve what still exists, but find adequate resources to provide quality news and information to local communities, and not just for existing players, but for new entrants as well. We didn't come today with any silver bullets, but we do have some suggestions we think would help preserve quality journalism in smaller communities across Canada. We support C18, but think more is needed through the continuation of existing programs and perhaps the addition of others. Programs such as the Canadian Periodical Fund, with aid to publishers and special measures for journalism, have been critical programs over many years, with special measures being a more recent addition. The Local Journalism Initiative, which has funded journalists throughout many news operations by reimbursing their wages, has really helped many operations step up their game and provide better quality content. A refundable subscription tax credit in lieu of today's non-refundable credit could be a big game changer for small outlets, especially because the value of today's tax credit just doesn't make any difference for small outlets. There's just not enough there.
Il vous reste 30 secondes, Monsieur Jamieson.
You have 30 seconds remaining, Mr. Jamieson.
We should also consider other mechanisms, perhaps a tax on digital advertising sold in the Canadian market that would be redistributed to Canadian news outlets. Advertising has long supported journalism. We fundamentally believe that quality news coverage, however it is served, is vitally important to all communities, and we encourage that the federal government is working on ways to support our industry in a time of great need. Time is of the essence. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Jamieson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jamieson. Now we'll move on to Mr. Kevin Desjardins from the Canadian Association of Broadcasters. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak before you today regarding this important bill. The CAB represents over 700 members across the country, including most private radio and television stations and specialty services.
News Act as an important step towards recognizing the value of broadcasters' news content and providing the necessary framework for fair negotiation between news organizations and online platforms. Maintaining professional newsrooms in communities across the country is a fundamental commitment of Canada's broadcasters. Last year, Canadian broadcasters invested $681 million in news and community information programming. Unfortunately, broadcast news is a very challenging enterprise. It has depended largely on entertainment programming that draws the largest audiences and the greatest ad revenues. Over the past decade, foreign online platforms have moved aggressively to corner the markets in search and advertising. Using their dominant positions, they have dramatically impacted the advertising market through the algorithmic exploitation of user data. Now, foreign digital platforms take more than half of those ad revenues out of Canada's economy. They are offshored to entities with little connection to Canadians' values or public interest and profoundly undermine Canadian news organizations' ability to support and maintain a robust news gathering infrastructure. At the same time, these entities are exploiting Canadian news organizations' online content to deepen their competitive advantages in advertising. Search and social platforms may help to direct audiences to online news sites, but they are not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. In reality, They are retaining most of the value from those user interactions with news sites through their ability to gather, aggregate, resell, and exploit user data to advertisers through their algorithms. Nevertheless, social and search platforms provide no compensation to news sites for the value they derive from those interactions. Today, Canadian news organizations have no realistic option but to agree to the platform's terms given their dominant positions online and lack of regulatory oversight. As news broadcasters and publishers struggle to maintain the resources necessary to continue to inform Canadians, it is critical that a policy framework be developed to help recognize the value of their online content. This framework should recognize Canadian news organizations' unique contributions to the public good and the value that is extracted from them by dominant digital platforms. And this is why Bill C-18 is so necessary. We believe that Bill C-18 strikes the right balance. It would enact fair and reasonable negotiation framework for Canadian news organizations and large global digital platforms. And it would provide an arbitrated backstop should those negotiations not be concluded constructively. We know such a framework can work. As Professor Rod Sims said earlier to this committee, Australia's code has been extremely successful in achieving its objective. More specifically, the Australian Code has helped to address the power imbalance I referred to earlier and compelled the platforms to negotiate in good faith. It has helped news organizations of all sizes to maintain and grow their newsroom staffing. Bill C-18 would not create a link tax, nor would it incentivize clickbait. It would not break the internet, as it has not in Australia. The incentives that are built into the bill clearly focus on sustaining journalism jobs in Canadian newsrooms. Moreover, because a government agency is only involved as a backstop to resolve disputes when no agreement between the parties has been reached, the proposed legislation poses no concerns to press freedom or free speech. Ensuring the viability of our newsrooms is critical to Canada's democracy. It is particularly essential as Canadians are increasingly confronted with misinformation and disinformation online. We know that when Canadians turn to online news, the most popular sources that are associated with sites are sites associated with Canadian broadcasters. The content that is ultimately of most use to citizens and to the continued value of our democracy is developed through trusted news organizations, including television and radio broadcasters. We do have a certain amendment with regards to Section 51, which is essentially just to strengthen this section and make sure that it does what it was intended to do. Canada's broadcasters want to continue to be a dependable source for local, national, and international news for Canadians. But to do so, we require a fair opportunity to be compensated for the value of our news content.
Merci beaucoup, M. Desjardins. Au tour maintenant de Channel Zero, M. Miller ou M. O'Brien. Un de vous deux a la parole.
Mr. Miller or Mr. O'Brien, please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Thank you and good morning. We appreciate the opportunity to appear today. My name is Cal Miller. I'm the president of Channel Zero, an independent Canadian broadcaster, and the owner-operator of CHCH Television in Hamilton. With me today is Greg O'Brien, head of news at CHCH, and also former editor and publisher of CART.ca, Canada's leading news outlet for our broadcasting and telecom sectors. In our brief opening comments, we want to speak to 3 things today. First, what the history and current operations of CHCH tell us about the importance of local news, how it has never been profitable on its own and has always required subsidy. Second, how government support designed correctly does not compromise journalistic integrity or editorial independence. And third, how Bill C-18 checks both of these boxes, which is why we support it. As you know, and also specifically recognized in Bill C-11, local news is key to local broadcasting. Unfortunately, while in the past local news was sustained with a cross-subsidy from profitable U.S. programming, the draining of Canadian ad revenues to U.S. platforms now makes that impossible.
CHCH's history is emblematic of this. Today, we are the #1 news organization in Hamilton, Halton, and Niagara, and the #2 rated television station for local news in the entire Greater Toronto-Hamilton area. We air more local news and information programming than virtually any other local broadcaster in Canada, well over 30 hours weekly. And we are available on every platform, chch.com, through our social channels on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and on Instagram and TikTok. We reach our citizenry wherever they are and on whatever platform they use, wherever they are looking for news, and even when they don't know they need news. Our resources, talent, and devotion allow us to be on top of things in our area like no others. Just last month, we had a tragic live shooting incident spread across our region. It was national news. A shooting in Mississauga, followed by another in Milton, and a final one in Hamilton. Only CHCH News was live at all three scenes that evening, telling our viewers what had happened and what was happening in real time. Rewind 13 years, and it was a very different story. CHCH, then owned by CanWest Global, was on the brink of extinction. The old model of cross-subsidy from top US network programming was failing. Channel Zero stepped in with a recommitment to local news and information programming and crucial support from what was then the CRTC's Local Programming Improvement Fund, or LPIF. Fast forward to today, and it is the CRTC's Independent Local News Fund, ILNF, introduced in 2017 that provides us with vital support for the production of locally reflective news.
The trouble is that the ILNF support, which is based on a percentage of revenue contributions from licensed television distributors, or BDUs, is declining just as the needs are increasing, which is why this bill and Bill C-11 are so important to us. The other important lesson from our history is this, and I challenge anyone to find any evidence that the support or subsidy that we have received from funds like LPIF or ILNF have in any way affected our editorial slant or our independence in any way. I can tell you categorically, they have not, and they will not in the future, whether they come via the CRTC funds, C-11 or C-18. As long as support is transparent, automatic, not discretionary, and from a body arm's length from government, there's simply no real trigger or basis for government or other third-party influence over that editorial. To conclude, in our view, Bill C-18 meets the twin test of introducing a mechanism to provide material support for local news and doing it in such a way as to preserve editorial independence. Should the committee choose to entertain amendments, we do, however, have one suggestion. We believe that both for the purposes of fair bargaining and to provide greater public transparency, there should be greater public disclosure on deals, namely on all news businesses that do deals with platforms, including exempt deals, and including the total consideration, if not the deals themselves. We understand that Friends has proposed a specific amendment to Section 32 in this regard. We support that proposal. Thank you for allowing us to make this presentation, and we'd be pleased to respond to any questions you might have.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. You were able to do that before the time you were given, but I'd like to apologize for the other speakers because I do give you 30 seconds to a minute before having to cut you off. I might have to do that with the gentleman from Le Devoir. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you, Chair. Le Devoir is a daily newspaper of reference in the Quebec market. It's unlike any other and is part of a select club of media that rely on subscriptions, both digital and print, to support themselves. Subscriptions provide nearly 2/3 of our revenue and allow us to look to the future with cautious optimism. Thanks to prudent management, optimal use of Quebec and Canadian tax credit programs, and a strategy of revenue diversification, we have had 6 years of profitability in the last 8 years. In the span of 4 years, we have gone from 100 to 175 employees. I'm saying this because very few have, other companies like ours have managed to do the same. Things are complicated. The environment is competitive, marked by the presence of influential players who rely on free content. We take nothing for granted. We have to compete with the giants of digital commerce, Google and Meta, in the advertising market. We don't have the luxury of taking losses, nor do we have a sponsor to support us. That's why Le Devoir supports the federal government's intentions to legislate Google and Meta. As you may already know, Le Devoir has already signed contractual agreements with 4 of the largest digital platforms. Long before the government expressed its intention to regulate these companies, we signed an agreement with the MSN portal in 2014 and with Apple News Plus in 2020. For our own reasons, we signed agreements with Meta in May 2021 and with Google in October 2021. We wanted to diversify our income sources, and it allowed us to achieve our goal. And this is what I'd like to really point out. It means that we have relationships based on collaboration, cooperation with Google and Meta. We knew that at some point we would have to negotiate with them, and that's the purpose of C18. Rather than end up in a conflictual relationship, we simply chose to rebuild that relationship sooner. Given what I've said, it's important for us to be able to negotiate individually in the context of this bill. We believe that our interests will be better served by direct negotiations. We realize others will want common negotiations. Unfortunately, there's a lot of incomprehension in our field on digital platforms. Some professors and others have said that Google and Meta have stolen our content or advertising revenue. This overlooks the fact that media outlets voluntarily allow their content to flow on Google, Meta, Instagram, Twitter, and other platforms. These companies have shattered the traditional business model. True, but they haven't stolen anything. They've demonstrated unparalleled technological innovation. They have benefited from a lack of legislative oversight around the world due to the overly liberal interpretation of the concept of net neutrality. They have created audience segments for advertisers that we can never compete with. Organizations like Le Devoir can simply not do away with the strength of the power of Google and Meta. They make content discoverability possible. They make it possible to expand the user base and potentially convert them into subscribers. We're in a complex relationship, a relationship of interdependence and complementarity that we don't talk about enough as publishers. That being said, we can't ignore the imbalance in this relationship between news media and digital platforms. It is because of this imbalance and the concentration of digital advertising revenue in the hands of a duopoly that we need Bill C-18. You have 1 minute left, sir. Quickly, ways in which we could improve C-18. This imbalance is not just about advertising. There's also the subscription aspect that has to be considered. Some important information seems to be retained, like email addresses, sharing data, and other things. Other aspects should be included. Le Devoir is concerned by linguistic duality as well, and we believe the CRTC should have the obligation to ensure that future negotiations respect linguistic duality, and small markets in Quebec and the rest of Canada that have a completely different linguistic situation than other media outlets. Also, we believe that the best way to go ahead would be to ask for negotiations based on the cost of labor. This is something that Australia has done. 30% of labor costs, 20% for Google, 10% for Meta. But if we choose that in order to avoid disturbances, we should limit the salaries that are admissible to this, as we do under some tax credits. We wouldn't want to create a new scheme where larger companies would be winners and smaller local niche markets players would lose out. I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you, Mr. Miles. We still have 2 speakers. Google Canada, Colin McKay, Chief of Public Policy and Government Relations. Mr. McKay, you have 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et membres du comité.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
To participate in your study of Bill C-18. Access to authoritative news is critical for democracy and core to our mission at Google. For 20 years, we've been helping Canadians find the answers to what they are searching for online, including relevant and authoritative news content. Connecting people to news is a responsibility we take very seriously. Let me be absolutely clear. Google shares your goal of supporting a sustainable future for journalism and the news in Canada. This includes thoughtful approaches to regulation, and continuing to provide meaningful contributions, financial and otherwise. Our concerns with C-18 are serious. So is our commitment to working with the government and the news industry on solutions. In its current form, C-18 will make it harder for Canadians to find and share trusted and authoritative news online. Il aura aussi, au mieux, des résultats imprévisibles pour l'écosystème canadien de l'information en évolution.
We have 4 main concerns about Bill C-18.
Includes an undue preference provision that prohibits a platform from disadvantaging any eligible news businesses. We appreciate the desire to prevent a platform from retaliating against a publisher, but that's not what this language does. Under threat of legal action, this measure will restrict Google and other platforms from applying policies and providing features that elevated trusted information sources over lower quality content. This makes search less relevant and less safe for Canadians. It is essential that the undue preference language be amended. Second, unlike the Australian Code, C-18 defines eligible news businesses extremely broadly and does not require a publisher to adhere to basic journalistic standards. This will lead to the proliferation of misinformation and clickbait. Combined with the undue preference provision, this means Canadians could be served foreign propaganda outlets alongside reporting from Le Devoir or the Globe and Mail. This isn't a hypothetical example. This happened in Germany under similar regulatory language. The government's existing framework of qualified Canadian journalism organizations is a model that should be built upon, not undercut. Third, payment for links. The internet is built on the principle of freely linking between websites. We all find information, products, and services by clicking through links. Businesses, including news businesses, want to be found by Canadians via search. Google sends billions of visits to Canadian news publishers a year at no cost to them, helping them grow their readership, subscriber base, build trust with readers, and make money. Including payment for links repeats the mistakes other jurisdictions have backed away from. It violates global copyright norms and local legal precedent, including the Supreme Court in Crooks. Payments for links also incentivizes cheap, low-quality clickbait content over public interest journalism, and clearly favors large publishers over small, as they simply have more content to link to. Fourth, as a small and independent news publishers have warned, C-18 lacks transparency and benefits large legacy publishers over small, because they can afford the regulatory cost of this framework. A fund, similar to the Canada Media Fund, would resolve the issues we have raised and would ensure a diversity of Canadian news publishers receive money in a timely, equitable, and transparent manner. This is a history-making opportunity for Canada to craft world-class legislation that is clear and principled on who it benefits. Legislation that actively supports diversity and inclusivity and ensures that financial contributions go to support thoughtful local journalism. Legislation that recognizes the full value exchange that already occurs between platforms and publishers and is laser-focused on supporting an innovative, diverse, and sustainable Canadian news ecosystem for the long term. C-18 is not that legislation. Je tiens à répéter que Google partage votre objectif.
I want to reiterate that Google shares your goal of supporting a sustainable future for journalism in the news in Canada.
We do not think the measures enacted by C-18 are the interests of Canadians, nor are they an effective response to the unique challenges facing Canadian news publishers. The bottom line for us is that Canadians deserve better than what we see in C-18, which, to be frank, is simply bad public policy. Thank you again for the invitation to appear. I look forward to your questions.
Merci, Monsieur McKay.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Now it is Ben Scott's turn, the Director of Reset. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and for the invitation from this committee. My name is Ben Scott. I'm the Director of Reset. We are an international nonprofit organization that works with governments to help realign the incentives of the technology industry back to support the values of democracy. And I can give you a comparative perspective of how these issues and bills like C-18 are being considered all around the world. And though I'm currently based in England, I lived for years in Canada and I have a great deal of familiarity with the Canadian market. What I can tell you is lots of folks around the world see the same problems you do. Journalism in crisis, as you've heard from colleagues on this panel. Market power in the digital advertising industry held by a handful of titans. And an opportunity to intervene to make sure that journalism continues to flow to the public. What you've got in C18 is among the best bills I have seen of its type. But the point that I want to begin with today is a simple but fundamental one. As the only non-industry representative on this panel, I feel I have a duty to make it. This legislation must not be about publishers. It must be about the public. Too much of this debate plays out as if government were simply refereeing a contest between big tech and big publishers. That's wrong. What justifies this market regulation is the public interest in making sure that quality journalism is delivered to the people. And like you, other governments are looking at this problem and trying to make sure that they address the market failures in the right way. Because these aren't just failures between industries. This has hastened the destruction of public service journalism in ways that really undermine democratic integrity. This committee knows well the stats in Canada, $5 billion out the door in terms of news industry revenues, 450 news outlets closed over the course of the last 15 years, a third of Canadian journalism jobs gone. That's a crisis. And there are many factors causing that crisis, but one of the more obvious ones is the market power over digital advertising held by two companies. I'll refer you to some analysis done by the British Competition and Markets Authority, which breaks down the digital ad market into that services provided to publishers, services provided to advertisers, and the exchange in between. And Google has, according to the CMA, a 90% market share in the first two of those segments and a 50% market share in the exchange. Now that's market power by any reasonable definition. And that's the reason why so much revenue is flowing away from news organizations. But we're only intervening here on behalf of news organizations because they provide a public good called journalism, which the people need. There's nothing in here about a link tax. There's nothing in here that's going to break the internet. This is about restoring fairness in the marketplace so that it provides a critical public service. Now, so far what I see is that Canada is doing as good or a better job than other countries at keeping the public at the center of this conversation. But I want to make 3 points that are, I think, essential for making sure this bill delivers for the Canadian people. One is C18's got to prioritize fairness and inclusivity. It's got to offer deals that are equitable and on similar and reasonable terms for small publishers and large publishers alike. Second, we've got to insist on the fact that any new revenue that comes in, and it might be up to 30% of revenue, and that's a big number, as you've heard, that revenue has to go towards journalism production, not towards buybacks or debt load. It has to go towards the production of news. That's the reason why this legislation matters.
1 minute, Monsieur Scott.
1 minute, Mr. Scott.
The third piece is transparency. We've got to ensure that the terms of these deals are subject to rigorous regulatory oversight and as much transparency as the industry will bear. That ensures that these negotiations don't fall into the trap that we're in now, where secret deals are made between publishers and platforms, and no one has an idea on whether they're fair or whether they're delivering for the public or not. This bill is not a perfect solution, and it's not a permanent solution, but it matters. This is real money for real journalism that restores fairness and transparency in this market. Laws like this are going to be made all around the world, and Canada, in my view, has an opportunity to lead and set a high standard that will deliver for the Canadian public and set an example for others to follow. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Everyone has now had a chance to give their opening remarks. We will now move on to our first question round by MPs. The first turn goes to the Conservative Party. Ms. Rachel Thomas has the first turn. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you. My first question goes to Mr. McKay. Mr. McKay, the Department of Canadian Heritage has said they've denied that this bill gives any sort of monetary value to links. However, when the Heritage Minister, Minister Pablo Rodriguez, was asked by CTV's Evan Solomon about this, he actually confirmed that, in fact, he did attribute a monetary value to the links. To quote him directly, he said, "There's a value to that," referring to the links. If you click on the link and go to the news, there's a value. There seems to be a discrepancy then between what the department officials are saying and then what the minister is saying. And so I'd be curious, with regard to an industry perspective, do you feel that that there is, in fact, a discrepancy here, which I have pointed out? I would be curious to know whether or not you agree to that, and then whether or not you feel it might be of benefit to bring the minister to the committee so that we would have opportunity to clarify this. Would that be good for you?
Thank you very much for the question. I'll start off by underlining that we share the same spirit of ensuring a sustainable news industry in Canada, both today and in the future, and many of the observations made by my fellow witnesses we agree with. To the question you're asking, in terms of payment for links, the legislation specifically creates an obligation based on making available links to journalism sites, and that creates the structure upon which C18 is built. So there is difference among the department and the minister and then platforms on whether that constitutes a link tax. But I would underline that it infers value to links and then creates an incentive for publications to look for the repetition and promotion of links. And that feeds into the conversation about what exactly is defined as an eligible news business. I will say that, to your second point, I will say that we are here because we want to participate in a thorough conversation about the details of this legislation so that it can move forward and be implemented in a way that achieves the public policy goals. And that includes hearing from the minister and hearing from other stakeholders in future meetings.
Thank you. Another portion of this bill, and I believe you touched on this very briefly in your opening remarks, has to do with the discretionary power that is being left with the CRTC given this legislation in its current form, which is the form that the government is hoping to push it through in. What are your concerns with regards to the lack of clarity around the powers being given to the CRTC and how they might regulate you?
I've tried to make the point today that there are some very broad terms with little definition contained within C18 that rely upon interpretation and regulation and by the regulator. And when we, as a company and a platform that serves billions of clicks to Canadians a day, evaluated that, we came to the conclusion that there are immediate implications of how the legislation is written. And it's always preferable that legislation provide clarity and direction rather than leaving it to interpretation by the regulator, especially when we're talking about a situation where you could have the amplification and promotion of misinformation or even disinformation. And certainly when you're talking about the concerns that have been raised by the other journalism organizations on this panel, which speak to innovation, capturing Canadian audiences, and generating new revenue models.
Mr. McKay, my last question for you has to do with this idea that Bill C-18 would level the playing field. That's one of the things that the minister is trying to promote as his messaging or his talking points with this. However, we've heard subsequent testimony that actually is not the case. So, for example, Jen Garrison of The Line said that Bill C-18 will actually, and I quote, favor incumbent media players over innovative models, small outlets, and news startups. In other words, it will continue to award the big players or legacy media with a whole lot of money, but actually local newspapers and smaller sources of media, particularly those with fewer than 2 full-time employees, will actually be put at a great disadvantage. And so, in fact, it doesn't level the playing field. I realize you're not in that business. You're the tech company that is going to help promote these individuals or give access to their news sources. But my question for you is, I'm wondering if you can just give your thoughts on this, as well as the possibility of this bill doing. I guess wanting you to discuss or talk to me about tipping the scales and what this legislation will do to facilitate actually greater favor towards legacy media and perhaps a disadvantage to the smaller guys.
The legislation before us addresses a policy challenge that was identified 2 years ago. which is the threat to the existing journalism organizations in Canada. And it attempts to create a regulatory framework to address that. We've heard today from the other witnesses that there are many strategies and possible solutions to help bridge into a future generation of journalism. We at Google are not only an advertising platform, but we're also a partner with journalists. And through our Google News Initiative are working with them, as Mr. Miles described, to understand how readers are changing their behaviors and how to capture revenue and information from that behavior. And for us, C18 addresses an immediate problem, but as Mr. Scott identified, it does not solve for the future. So that's the challenge that's before you today.
Il reste 15 secondes.
Thank you. Mr. Jamieson, I would invite your response to this question as well. I think we're out of time for this round, but I'll get to you next time.
Merci beaucoup. Autour des...
Thank you very much. Liberals, Ms. Lisa Hebner, you have the floor, 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll start with Carl Miller.
At CHCH News. I appreciated the rundown of the history of CHCH from your perspective. As you know, I started there in August of 2001 and worked there right up until my election of last year. So a lot of those changes you were mentioning, I witnessed firsthand. And I guess it was 13 years ago that Channel Zero took over CHCH. When I started, we were under the Global banner. And then at some point during that summer, we heard from Global that we would go black as a station if they didn't find a buyer for us within a month. And then Channel Zero stepped up and became the knight in shining armor and took over CHCH. And then what we actually saw was an expansion of news coverage under Channel Zero. We were live news 7 days a week, more, I think, local coverage than anyone in North America. And I think we managed that it was an exciting time. The newsroom was full. There were people at the courthouse. There were people at City Hall. There were people knocking on doors, talking to people in Hamilton, and it felt like really important work. But it only lasted for a couple of years like that, Cal, and I'm wondering if you can talk about the business decision that ended that live news every day when we saw mass layoffs once again at CHCH. I was one of the few to survive that last, and we cut the coverage back down. So what was going on behind the scenes? What happened?
Thanks, Ms. Hefner. A great opportunity to be able to talk about that history. When we decided to make the acquisition of CHCH in the early part of 2009, the CRTC had at that time already determined that local news was under siege and in crisis. So it does feel repetitious to be talking 13 years later about local news still being in crisis. But the CRTC, under then Chair Conrad van Finkenstein, the Commission then devised something called the Local Programming Improvement Fund. And knowing that that money was going to be there, we were able to first make the decision to acquire CHCH and reorient it towards local news. And we were able to, as you said, expand news coverage to all day, all the time, because part of the quid pro quo in accepting that money was that we had to hit certain benchmarks of local news. So we expanded the news offering. We had market success in the expanded news offering. Unfortunately, when the then chair moved on, there was an interim chair for a short period of time, and that commission made a decision to discontinue the Local Programming Improvement Fund completely. And so we went from having a subsidy for local news to having no subsidy whatsoever. And it happened very quickly. And in a matter of 2 fiscal years, the money went from substantial to nothing. So to your point, what we had to do was, for the second time, I don't know about knight in shining armor, but for the second time, we had to step in and make tough decisions to ensure that CHCH would survive. Fortunately, a couple of years later, I think I would call it an error. The commission realized that that was a bit of an overstep, and by the end of 2017, I've got my days right. The ILNF, or Independent Local News Fund, was established. And that again gave us the ability to staff up, increase the number of hours of local programming, and really serve our audience and our community in a way that had been missing for the previous 2 years.
Thank you. And can you talk about the importance of CHCH to the communities in Hamilton, Halton, Niagara, and how that has led to the extremely high viewership numbers? And I'm wondering also if you can expand that to talk about the experience of the pandemic and what sort of reaction you got from communities for the service that CHCH provides.
I'd be happy to. Perhaps I'll do it in reverse, because the pandemic, start with the specific and go out to the global. And I'll maybe let Greg comment a little bit on that in the global sense. But in the specific, through the pandemic, we were live and on the ground. We were interrupting programming at all times because we knew that our community wasn't served by really any other news outlet. There is a Torstar local newspaper, the Hamilton Spectator, who have some editorial in our area, but we cover an area that is covers Niagara, Halton, and Hamilton, and even up towards Kitchener-Waterloo. And there were no other immediate and television broadcasters in that area to be able to deliver the news of what was happening on the ground as we were experiencing shutdowns, as we were experiencing mounting illnesses, deaths, and COVID cases. And so we took it upon ourselves, as did many other local broadcasters across the country, to interrupt as necessary. We would run the Prime Minister's news conferences.
Sorry, Cal, I'm running out of time, but can you just sum up for us? You saw viewership grow during that time, I understand.
Absolutely. While we served the community, viewership was up through the roof because people needed to know what was happening. We provided that service.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Miller.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller, and thank you, Lisa. Bloc Québécois is or the entire membership of the Bloc Québécois is busy chairing the meeting now, so I will come back to my term. I would like to ask one or two questions to the witnesses, but right now we'll go over to Peter Julian from the NDP for 6 minutes. Peter.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You're doing an excellent job, and I have no doubt that we will also give you a turn of questions. I'd like to begin with Mr. Miles from Le Devoir. And thank you to all witnesses for being with us today. You mentioned the 4 deals that you signed with MSN, Apple News, Meta, and Google. Are you prepared to disclose the results of those agreements? Because, of course, transparency is an important issue that has been raised repeatedly during the testimony we've been hearing for a number of weeks. The agreements were signed confidentially with those organizations, and they have confidentiality clauses. So today I cannot tell you what is contained in them. However, I was talking about the bill, which, when passed, would allow the CRTC to have access to the contents of the agreements to ensure they are equitable. And now, for understanding, there's a lot of information in the public realm that has been disseminated, that there are 2 ways to negotiate. You can negotiate about the digital impact, or you can negotiate based on the impact on the newsroom, and I think that's the best way. Question. And today, are you at least prepared to disclose the impact on Le Devoir when it comes to the number of journalists, for example, or perhaps another example? Answer. Once again, the agreement is confidential. But you can tell that if we took the trouble to sign it, it was helpful. It helped us launch ourselves into our digital transformation. We have a strategy to diversify our income, our revenues, and we are an organization that works in a very strict way when it comes to finances. So as regards the subscription model, the agreements are essential, and they allowed us, along with our financial strategies, to double our staff in our newsroom over a number of years. Also, our agreement with Google News made it possible for us to communicate better with them and talk about best practices, and that is also of untold value. Thank you. You have a number of suggestions. One of them is regarding linguistic duality. You also mentioned the obligation to share data. Could you tell us more about that recommendation to improve the bill? Answer. We're always saying that data is the oil and gas of the digital age. For Apple News Plus, for someone who subscribes to Apple News Plus, they become a client of Apple. And Apple is the company that's going to keep that email address, not Le Devoir. But we want to be able to build a relationship with the community. So it's important that a minimum amount of data be made available to us so that we can understand who are our listeners and our readers, to help our clientele grow and to bring them into our ecosystem instead of them only belonging to the Google or Apple ecosystem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here. I'd be interested in knowing which publication, which newspaper your family has been involved with for 3 generations. And also deeply appreciate your comments around C18. What I gather both from your appearance, but also the appearance from the Saskatchewan weekly newspapers as well, is that there is broad support in Alberta and Saskatchewan for moving ahead with C18, including other measures. And we certainly understand that. Your point about time is of the essence is extremely important. This is a message, of course, from my Conservative colleagues when you've got newspapers representing about half of their caucus supporting C18. I would hope they would be on board as well. And you raised the issue both of transparency and not leaving out smaller publications. What are the amendments that you would suggest in terms of the bill to ensure that very, very small community publications are included? Should the threshold of 2 journalists be lowered so that community newspapers at all levels, even in small communities, can benefit?
Well, our family is involved in Great West Media, so that originally came out of the St. Albert Gazette, which is our kind of flagship newspaper. My grandparents purchased the Gazette in the late 1960s, and then through the 80s and 90s, we acquired other papers across the province and mostly in rural areas throughout Alberta. And we also operate a printing facility here in St. Albert that serves many publishers across Alberta and northern BC. The question around eligibility and small publishers has been a difficult one because we have many of them. There are many small communities across Canada and especially here within Alberta that are served by pretty small operations, and small can be good. Many of them do a tremendously good job. Many of them are family-run operations. Brothers and sisters and
rapidement,
and
Monsieur Jamieson, s'il vous plaît.
Quickly, Mr. Jamieson, please. We need to clue up, please. I'll allow you to finish.
Oh, sorry. It's really difficult to determine how you get below that 2 journalist threshold, because we understand the difficulties of how do you keep some limitations on a program so that you are trying to deal with quality news operations. I don't know if we have a good answer on how do you actually deal with really small operators under a C18 type of scenario, other than using these other programs that have been in existence that have helped these operations survive.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jamieson, and thank you, Mr. Julian. Before we move to the second round of questions, I do have a number of questions I would like to ask our witnesses. Mr. Miles, in your opening remarks, you mentioned that it's important to consider linguistic duality. Of course, we know the case well. In Canada, French and English are the official languages, and sometimes in a minority context. So how can the linguistic reality be taken into account in these negotiations between the two parties? Thank you for the question. First, I think things need to be named. And I would insist that we, Quebec or outside of Quebec, media outlets, we still are in a North American Anglophone sea. And sooner or later, negotiations will be carried out in a given language with negotiators that wouldn't be the same people. So the fragility and the uniqueness of the Francophone culture needs to be taken into account, and the CRTC needs to be obligated to validate the situation. Question. Earlier, I heard one of the witnesses talk about the local journalism initiative. And I know that you're part of a jury that assesses applications under that program. Can you talk to us about small players who could be disadvantaged in negotiations under the bill that will become a law after C-18? Is there a way to ensure that smaller players in the media industry are not always in survival mode and can become more prosperous? Absolutely. I think that there is a wide range of measures. We didn't say so, but we think that most of the measures by the federal government should be maintained even after C-18 passes into law.
You know, the Australian model compensates the information media based on the number of employees in a room and other measures, and that's difficult for smaller outlets, emerging players who don't have major market positions, who don't have broad breadth digitally and have a small room. So this is going to be disappointing then. This bill will be disappointing to them. And this is why we need to reform things at the local level. I was part of that jury, and we did the best we could with the parameters we had. But by default, that ended up being beneficial to well-established major players nationally. Out of transparency, the Devoir was able to finance some positions in the IGM, and I think GL could be made more of a priority player for smaller players, and we can work on the positions, the actual positions, paid positions in one of these newsrooms. I think we could get there. So really focused on local needs. So C-18, says the chair, is not the solution to everything. We need to have measures in place for smaller private. Yes, I think that is the key to the future, some diversity. A quick question for Kevin Desjardins. This bill means what to you, even if it is passed? What are the consequences if it is not passed? On a positive side, I would say this. Newsrooms that would still exist throughout the country in large, medium, and small-sized broadcasters throughout the country, journalists that would be hired within these newsrooms as well. Now, if we don't go ahead with this, I think we'll see that there's going to be even more pain, in a way, for these newsrooms. And as we've said on multiple occasions here today, it's a crisis that's happening in these newsrooms. And for us, that is why it's important to go ahead with this bill.
Monsieur Desjardins.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. All right, we're doing well. We're at the second round of questions. Conservative Party to start, 5 minutes. Mr. Waugh, you have the floor.
Chair, I've watched the last couple of years major organizations like Torstar buy small and medium companies and then close them a year later. Side deals. And so they take their competitors out just like that. We've seen it in the Maritimes. We've seen it here in Ontario. We've seen it all over this country. The big get bigger. They buy small and medium newspapers, and then 6-8 months down the road, they close them. It's interesting, Mr. Julian, that you talk about, in our party, we represent everybody, and that's why we're concerned with number 18. Steve Nixon was here from the Saskatchewan Weekly newspapers, and I give this to the Alberta Weekly. Probably half of my small newspapers in Saskatchewan don't qualify for C18. They will go under. I don't have to tell you that one of the newspapers sold for $1 in my province recently. There is no value in small and medium newspapers in Saskatchewan. So how is C18, and I'll ask the Alberta Weekly Newspapers Association, because in your province there's a split. You may want C18. I look at other owners in your province that wouldn't be eligible for any of this money. So how do you speak on behalf of everyone in the province of Alberta with C18? Mr. Jamieson or Mr. Merrill?
Take that?
Yep, one of you. Mr. Jamieson or Mr. Merrill?
I can take this. Dennis Merrill. I'm Executive Director of the Alberta Weekly Newspapers Association. We do have, it's true, we do have a mix of small community newspapers and some larger ones that do qualify for the QCJO designation and would be able to participate in bargaining with Google and Facebook. So, and we actually have a number of even smaller independents that could qualify, but they haven't yet applied. So it's probably, as you suggest, Mr. Watts, about a 50-50, I would say, in our province, that 50% probably being able to participate and the other half not being able to. So,
yes.
So it does put us in a bit of an awkward spot, for sure.
It should, because it does in my province. I would say it would be higher. It could even be 80-20 against Bill C-18, because they don't have 2 people on staff right now. I want to go to Le Devoir. Mr. Miles, you've already made the agreements, you said, with MSN, Apple Plus, Meta, and Google. How much did you reap out of those, since you have said you're profitable for the last 6 years? And with C-18, as you know, it's all in secret. So can you please supply some numbers that you've already had the agreements with Meta and Google? Give me and give the committee, if you don't mind, some numbers that we can chew on, what you got from Google, what you got from Meta, to supply your organization with a profit.
I perfectly understand the question, but I'm not allowed to give any answer regarding the amounts. Those were 2 private corporations who made confidential deals. However, I can state that Le Devoir was profitable before those deals, and that the secret of our success relies on a strategy to diversify our revenues. We don't rely on a single source, and this is why I stress the emergency or the need for the media industry to think at the higher level that only C18. Think about your business model. Think about the whole stream of revenues that you can gather from your audience.
But if I can interject, because I'm short of time, we're hearing from the PBO there's $329 million thanks to Google and Meta. So here you are in front of the committee, not telling us what your deal is. It's all in secret. So you're one of the biggest newspapers, if not the biggest in Quebec. And how are we going to save the middle and lower class newspapers in this country, because we don't have an idea what you got, what the medium ones get and what the small ones should be asking for. 329 million goes pretty quick, if you don't mind me saying.
I will willingly give the amounts if there's a law in place, and if we're obliged to do so, I will inform the CRTC of the amounts. However, I cannot do it now. As far as the sense of fairness is concerned, I guess you can boost IGL. You can ask for the provincial government to do their parts. In Quebec, there's a 35% tax deduction that adds up to the federal one. It's the only province that did so. So I believe that provinces have a bigger role to play. And then you can cap the amounts that are available for the media. If you use, for example, 30% of the labor costs in a newsroom, you can actually make that threshold a bit higher for small players, and you can lower it to bigger ones.
Merci, Monsieur Miles. Vous pourrez élaborer peut-être avec un autre intervenant.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. We've already gone beyond our time. You might want to elaborate in another turn. It's the Liberals' turns now. Michael Coutu, you have the floor. Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to start by confirming the numbers that Mr. Scott gave us. Mr. Scott, you said that over the last several years, there's been an equivalent of $5 billion a year leaving Canada because of over the last 15 years, we've got to a point where $5 billion a year is leaving Canada because of the change in the system. 450 news businesses have shut their doors, and half of the reporters' jobs have been eliminated. Is that correct?
Yeah, those are numbers from the Ministry of Heritage.
Yeah, so that's those are incredible numbers. So I'll go over to Mr. McKay. Mr. McKay, as a large, the largest company in the room and probably in the country, how do those numbers, as a Canadian, reflect on Google and its position or outlook on the industry as a whole? When you hear those numbers, how do you react to that?
The numbers you've cited are a signal of the crisis that's overtaking the industry and has for several years. That includes some concern about advertising, but as mentioned by other members of the committee, it also concerns the restructuring of the business in Canada. What I'm here to communicate to you and to the committee is that we've been in Canada for 20 years, and we've been working with journalism organizations across the country, small, medium, and large, for many years, to try and help them make the transition and to try to help them both identify the opportunities as well as exploit them, not only in becoming an online presence, but in figuring out new revenue models like Mr. Miles has been identifying and Mr. Jameson cited. And that is our approach to working with the industry today, and it will continue to be, where we want to make sure that as there are shifts in one part of the industry, smaller organizations, medium organizations identify and then exploit the opportunities to grow their readership, to grow their impact, and to find new audiences.
So you would agree that Google has played a role in that transformation, both in a positive way, because obviously Google's an innovative company that's changed the world, but also it's played a role in these numbers that Heritage has provided.
I'd like to take a step back from the numbers that the department has provided to speak to the concept of value exchange. And as Mr. Miles has been hinting at...
Well, I'm going to keep asking questions then, if you don't mind. I'd like to know, with those changes that have occurred, in the last 15 years in Canada, we know that Google's response is to create these relationships with these media companies. You talked a lot about transparency. You talked a lot about fairness. You said that larger companies and smaller companies under the bill were not equal. So I just wanted to talk to you a bit about the deals that you have with publishers already. How many deals do you have with publishers in Canada so far?
We have deals that cover 150 publishers, 90% of which represent small, local, or regional communities.
And what's the value of those 150? Is there a number that's out there?
There's not a number that I can disclose, no.
But there is a number.
Well, there's a number of commercial agreements that would have a total number, but I'm not.
Would you say that you've reached 50% of the amount you're willing to contribute? Like, are we going to see that number double to 300? Is there any any type of long-term goals that you have? Do you want to double that number?
The long-term goal for us is to work with journalist organizations to ensure their vitality and continued contribution to Canadian society. It's an underlying principle of ours because it's essential to both our services and the expectations for customers.
So of the 150 publishers you have these secret deals with, these deals that are not open to the public, is there a range? Can you tell us what the smallest amount would be and the largest amount would be?
Not, but I would like to point out that they're commercial agreements, and as in any industry, commercial agreements are between two parties and are normally kept confidential. As has been discussed, the CRTC will have an oversight role, but
I want to keep asking my questions. I don't want to go into the CRTC piece. Maybe someone else will ask you this. Would you agree that that news is part of the public good?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so and I think most people would agree that it's part of the public good. So would you agree that these types of relationships, I know they're commercial and they're sensitive, but do you think eventually Canadians would be privy to this type of information? How much Google is actually and Facebook is actually contributing to these news companies, these publishers?
Rapidement, Monsieur McKay, il reste quelques secondes à peine.
You have a few seconds left.
Address the question you're identifying or the problem you're identifying. It will not grant transparency to these deals.
At the end of the day...
Michael, désolé, votre temps.
Michael, I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you. Just a note for the witnesses that are here in the room. You don't have to touch the actual microphones to get them to work. The technicians are responsible for doing that. If you'll allow me, I'll take advantage of my own time to ask a question. Mr. McKay, as a consumer, as a citizen, how much does this cost me as a consumer to consult or to turn to a page by going through Google? How much does it cost me? As a citizen, it's free. Okay, you present Google as a bulwark against misinformation. We often hear you say that C18 will open the way to misinformation. We've all heard this week data from a poll that you called for from Abacus Data, and some of the questions that are asked by Google in this poll seem a bit confusing to me in terms of countering misinformation. For instance, one of the questions was asked about the incredible power the CRTC would have versus media outlets, etc., under this bill. Did you clearly define the powers of the CRTC? If so, I mean, you're doing better than we are because we don't know what CRTC will get out of C18. This is the question that I would like to ask you. 70% of people are concerned about extreme powers in the hands of the CRTC. Can you tell me what the question is?
Which is a snapshot in time, is reflective of our concerns in the legislation not having the detail that provides us with the certainty of the impact this legislation will have on the availability of information and the amplification of disinformation for Canadians.
Donc, c'est pas nécessairement une préoccupation des...
So this is not really a concern for Canadians, it's a concern for Google, actually, that we saw as a result of this poll saying that seems to be indicating the Canadians are concerned. I was asking you how much it would cost me as a citizen, and in your poll, you asked a question, and the result was that Canadians are certainly not prepared to pay even minimum fees to go through Google to look at a page. What question did you ask Canadians exactly to get this poll, to give them this idea that there would be costs that they would have to bear to look at pages through Google? I don't understand. You're trying to counter disinformation or misinformation. It seems like a dichotomy here.
I can't speak to the exact question. I can make that information available to the committee.
On apprécierait la recevoir, Monsieur McKay, parce que...
We'd like that information, Mr. Kay, because this is a poll that you say you're using to really state your opinions on this bill. I think it'd be really important for us to know specifically how people were guided in this process in answering these questions out of a desire for transparency. We'll wait for that one with impatiently. And I'm going to finish my turn, and then I'll hand over the floor to my colleague, Mr. Julian Peter, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Need that information, and all of us have to combat disinformation. And I was, another member of the committee, very disturbed by how Google approached that particular opinion poll. So that information would be helpful. Got a number of short questions, Mr. McKay. So I'd just like basically a yes or no answer. Can you confirm that worldwide income for Google last year was $256.7 billion?
I don't have that number in front of me, unfortunately.
Okay, that is a staggering amount of money, $250 billion. Can you confirm as well that Google opposed vehemently the bill that was put into place in Australia that is working very well and serves as a model for the bill here?
We spoke quite loudly about the need for a workable solution in Australia, which they have landed upon.
So you confirm that Google opposed that too, right? So I'm glad that you've confirmed that. That is consistent with positions that Google has taken. At a previous parliamentary hearing, you were asked about the number of staff, the number of employees that you have cracking down on online hate. We've had concerns leveled against Google around homophobia, racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. At the time you were asked how many full-time staff work in Canada, and you weren't able to give that figure. Could you give it to us now?
I don't have a figure for that today. What I can tell you is that we have global teams that deal with this to address any one of these numbers of issues that are problematic for all of us.
I'm a little concerned that Google's unable to or unwilling to provide that figure. I mean, you were asked a few months ago, you're asked again today, and I get a sense of stonewalling, and I don't feel comfortable with that. I mean, Google does have a responsibility to come clean. Is it your commitment to this committee that you will provide that number this week?
What I can underline for the committee is our commitment to addressing those issues, which is ongoing, and it has been for years, that we are making those investments in teams around the world to both identify and then deal with the sort of online commentary and discourse that Canadians are identifying, but also individuals around the world are concerned about.
So you will not provide those figures to us?
I'll get back to the committee.
You commit to provide those figures to the committee this week? Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. I think that's important information.
Absolument. C'est tout le temps qu'on avait pour ce tour.
This was all the time we had for this round of questions. Let's follow up with the Conservative Party. You have the floor for 5 minutes, Martin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the time. I'd like to go to Mr. Jameson, Mr. Morrell, to do with the Alberta piece in the sense of representing the news media. When I think of the ones in my riding like Strathmore, Chestermere Anchor, Brooks Bulletin, Drumheller, and they don't fall within the parameters that you've talked about in your organization. They talked to me about the 30% of federal funding for advertising that came to their newspapers or weeklies that's now gone to the majors. Their suggestion is that 30% of advertising that the federal government now sends out of this country to the international should come back to the weeklies. That would solve the problem. Any response to that particular comment?
I guess I'm not terribly clear on what you mean by the 30% going to the majors. I think we have all seen, no matter what size of operation, that
my response is it's to Google and Facebook. Google and Facebook.
Sorry, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't have the numbers sitting right in front of me, but it's well documented that the federal government has moved, a tremendous amount of their advertising spending into major online platforms and away from local newspapers.
So if that was returned, the sense of advertising was returned to weekly papers, the papers in my writing suggest that would resolve this issue.
I don't know if that'd be the case for everybody. It would certainly be helpful. It's something that we've advocated for over time, both at the federal and provincial level, trying to get more government advertising into local papers. They're a very effective means of reaching local communities.
One of the things that I've done is I've surveyed my constituents about which papers they read. Number one, they identify their local newspaper as their first source to get local information, and two, is the most trusted source of information. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and we have done lots of research over the years that would confirm that the local community newspapers are well trusted, and people look to them first for information, because those are often, as I said in my opening statement, those are often the only operations providing local news.
The second part of that is the one they don't trust that this deal C-18 would benefit most is the legacy media. That's the one my constituents don't trust, and they don't see more money going to them as an advantage. Do you have a response to that?
Well, I guess it depends what you mean by legacy. I mean, we are all, I mean, it seems to be kind of an opaque term because, you know, we get termed as legacy. You know, we have papers that have been operating since the early 1900s. What is legacy, or is that an issue that some people have with kind of larger outlets? You know, I think in fairness that everybody wants to try to do a good job of journalism in their communities, but most really lack the resources to do that properly anymore. And yes, of course, there are different issues with particular companies across Canada, but I think everybody really does want to do a good job. They just do not have the resources to sustain that anymore.
When you mentioned the resources in a sense, and you sort of are hedging on how to solve the problem because of the number of weekly papers in my riding that you're familiar with do not have 2 full-time journalists. I can't think of any of them that do. So how would you resolve that?
Well, and of course, many of them are wearing multiple hats, right? You know, whether they be full-time journalists or not, many people in small operations, even in mid-sized operations, we all wear many hats every day, right? So, you know, there's been thoughts around, well, could the LJI program be supplemented to help bring those operations up to a 2-person newsroom? You know, would additional government advertising spending help with that? Any number of different programs that we kind of have talked about over time that might help bring those newsrooms back, because like I said before, it's not necessarily just trying to maintain what is currently there. It's trying to find a way to provide adequate resources to provide good quality news content to these different communities. And for a lot of them, that means they need to add back because so many of them have been decimated. They're shells of their former selves, right? And a lot of operations are trying to do the best they can, but they aren't doing what they should be doing because they just cannot afford to do it anymore.
What would your ultimate solution be then to resolve that issue that's there with the 2 journalists? What would you recommend as an amendment?
It's really challenging. It's really challenging to see because, of course, when you spread this out over all the communities in Alberta, there are many small communities, and it's an expensive issue. And I don't know if there's any one particular thing. You know, we talk about LGI, we talk about things like aid to publisher that have helped over time. I don't know if there's any one thing. I think it's highly likely that it's going to be a combination of many factors to help all the different business models and different types of operations that are out there. It's going to be a culmination of several different things to make that work.
Merci, Monsieur Jamieson. C'est le temps qu'on a pour.
Thank you, Mr. Jamieson. This is it for this turn. It's Liberals now. Lisa, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
So go back to Mr. McKay with Google and these agreements that we know have already been signed with some news producers in Canada. In these agreements, does Google insist on a non-disclosure agreement, and if so, why?
These are standard contractual agreements with publishers and other organizations, and they're mutually agreed terms.
So the non-disclosure agreement is part of that mutually agreed term?
It's a part of most commercial agreements, as I understand.
And so, without asking you details about how much each news producer is getting, can you tell us how Google decides how much each organization will get?
We don't make that decision. We talk to each organization about the package that would be included in an agreement that would help them address their challenges as a news organization. And that includes both the level of, I guess you would say, revenue exchange, but as well programming, technical support, and other elements.
And so with these agreements that are already in place, I understand they are 2 or 3 year agreements. Would Google be prepared to renew all of those agreements if C-18 does not pass in the House of Commons here?
We've been negotiating these agreements and striking these partnerships with journalism organizations since before C-18 was introduced. It's a reality of the journalism industry in Canada and globally, and we remain partners and we're committed to the success of journalism.
Thank you for that. Over to Mr. Scott. I appreciated in your opening statement your reframing the argument to a public interest perspective rather than the public versus the tech giants. You said that the revenue has to go towards the production of news. Tell us how you see that best happening. How can we best ensure that extra revenue from Google and Facebook would go towards the production of news? That was for Mr. Scott. If you missed that. Thanks.
You can bake that into the criteria that's reviewed by the regulator when they look at the deals, and make sure that the companies that are receiving these commercial agreements can demonstrate that they're putting the money into the production of news. I think most publishers would be very happy to do that because that's what they want to be doing with the money.
Thank you. And maybe I'll go to Mr. Kevin Desjardins. We've been talking about how under the QCJO requirements, an organization should have 2 journalists. What do you think about this? Is there anything, do you agree that we need more journalists and that anything that will promote and help organizations hire more journalists is a good thing? And that maybe we need more support so the smaller organizations can hire more journalists, and so that overall we have more journalists in Canada?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I think that that bar of 2 journalists is a pretty low bar. And I respect the fact that there are small publishers of community papers, say, or whatnot, that may have a struggle in some ways. But, I think that the point is that there are probably a lot of people who are used as freelancers and stringers and whatnot, and maybe for some of those organizations, it motivates them to bring those people on as full-time employees. If that's a piece of the legislation that motivates getting more journalists employed in newsrooms, then I think that that's a good thing, rather than us trying to bend ourselves backwards into a pretzel to figure out a way to make sure that certain newsrooms are allowed to continue to use part-timers, stringers, volunteers, what have you. I think 2 is a pretty low number, and I think it's something that we should be encouraging the hiring of more journalists in newsrooms.
Do we need more support from the Canadian government as well to make that happen, like the Local Journalism Initiative, for example? Do we need to add to those programs to be able to help more news organizations qualify for this new structure?
And I think that one of the themes that sort of come up through some of the discussions today is the fact that people are pointing to a number of different initiatives. And I think that what I would say is that, Bill C-18 is something that can really help us in moving forward and helping to keep journalism sustainable and vital, but it's not the only thing. There has to be a number of different things that are working together. We've put some things into our pre-budget submission in terms of addressing the way that advertising tax exemptions are managed. There's a lot of different things out there. Cal from CHCH mentioned the Independent Local News Fund. All of these things have to work together, and I don't think that there is a single solution.
Merci, Monsieur Desjardins. Merci.
Thank you very much. Time is up, and we do have time for a 3rd round of questions, beginning with the Conservative Party. Ms. Thomas, you have 5 minutes.
Clarification. I just want to make sure I'm going in this next round, but my colleague Marilyn is also up for questions, and she hasn't had a chance to go yet. I just want to make sure we're going to get to her. Okay, perfect.
Oui,
Thank you.
absolument.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So I guess I just have a couple of quick comments that I'll just state for the record. Mr. Desjardins, I believe that the point you're making with regards to employees, you're saying that 2 is a low bar, that's no problem, that should be expected. I would just highlight for those that might be reading this material or listening to this material that that's actually a rather privileged position. There is nothing that says that 2 journalists working full-time equals good journalism. And if that is, in fact, the goal of this legislation, to continue to support good journalism, then there is no reason that we should have a bar for 2 journalists. Instead, the criteria should, in fact, be good journalism. So I just would like to highlight that for the benefit of anyone that might be watching. Mr. Couteau insinuated that there is this secret deal that has taken place between Google and media sources. And he insinuated that we therefore need C-18 in order to help prevent that. I would like to expose that actually C-18 doesn't require any transparency. In fact, it perpetuates secrecy. All of those negotiations can be had behind closed doors, and the results of those negotiations don't have to be made public. So let's be very clear about that. My question is to Google, which of course is Mr. McKay, who is here at the table today. And my question for him is this. Publishers used to use newsstands in order to have their newspapers displayed or
Point of order, Mr.
displayed.
Un rappel au règlement, Monsieur.
A point of order, Mr. Couteau.
Very clear. My question specifically to Mr. McKay was around his relationship, Google's relationship, I should say, with publishers. That was the questioning. The member opposite just said that I said we needed Bill C-18 to open up this transparency. I never made that statement, so maybe she could correct her record.
Là-dessus, Madame Thomas?
Would you like to respond, Madam Thomas?
Certainement, oui. Continuez.
So my question to you, Mr. McKay, is that publishers used to use newsstands, so magazines and newspapers would have an opportunity to be sold through these newsstands. Now, we know that those publishers would actually pay the newsstands in order to make those available. Now, today in modern society, Facebook, Twitter, Google, etc., function as those newsstands, making access readily available. Again, if this bill is about access, if it's about making news readily available to Canadians, if it's about the public good, I have questions with regard to that, because I'm wondering to what extent this bill will actually ensure that that is the case versus to what extent it will actually stifle the opportunity that Canadians have to be able to access a plethora of sources rather than just a select few that happen to be able to enter into negotiations. Mr. McKay, do you care to comment?
Thank you very much for the question. As it stands, Canadians come to Google search to seek an answer to a question, and we provide them with multiple trustworthy and authoritative sources. And they are presented in order of relevance and then trustworthiness and quality of information. That includes many, many Canadian publications. It also includes many, many other Canadian sites. The challenges identified in my opening remarks is that this legislation contains terms that would create an imbalance in the relationship between Canadian media and the presentation of information fairly in Google search. And it would incentivize, in some cases, misinformation and clickbait that may not be generated by the sort of journalism organizations that this legislation is meant to support and to help grow.
Thank you, and I think that that's a good point, because while the intent might be good to help facilitate journalism, to help make sure that Canadians are given access to news, to ensure the public good is protected, I can get behind those ideals. However, this legislation actually would appear to do the exact opposite, which is the point that you've raised here today. Now, my next point or question is this, is if a news source, if a publisher didn't want Twitter or Facebook or Google to be able to promote their site or provide a link, they have the ability to opt out, but they don't. They don't opt out. So they seem to be benefiting then from these platforms that are perpetuating their links. Otherwise, why stay in? Do you care to comment?
There very definitely is a value to any site, including publishers and journalists, to making their content available on search and on other services. There's also an opportunity, as Mr. Miles identified, for them to handle those information seekers and those users to convert them into readers, into subscribers, as soon as they land on their website. So we are, in effect, providing that newsstand service, but at no cost and with immediate response and relevancy to Canadians.
So, in fact, it is no cost to them, but it actually is a cost to you.
Yes.
To the tune of what?
I can't speak to the total cost of our network and our search engine, but it is a substantial cost, and it's been an investment we've been making in Canada for the past 20 years.
Google reported that it's to a cost of $500 million. Thank you, Mr. McKay.
Thank you.
Merci, Madame Thomas. On passe au Parti libéral avec...
Thank you. We'll now move on to Chris Biddle for the Liberals for 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. McKay has said a couple of times that Google is a partner of journalists and journalism. And it's shocking to me because meeting after meeting, we have all of your partners come up to support this bill and condemn your practices. I guess my first question is to Mr. Scott. Globally, is Google a partner of journalists and journalism?
Well, I'll use the newsstand analogy that just came up in the last round of questions. Imagine that the newsstand industry in Canada was owned by one company with a 90% market share, and they took 80 cents out of every dollar of advertising that went to every newspaper that put their paper in that newsstand. But in order to reach audiences, you have to be in the newsstand. That's a partnership of a sort, but one that is incredibly exploitative. And I also think it is ironic to hear Google say that agreements that they make behind closed doors with news publishers are commercial licensing agreements. But when those same commercial licensing agreements are mandated by law, they're link taxes. This is the kind of doublespeak that you don't often hear from partners.
Thank you so much. I guess with friends like that, for friends like Google, who needs enemies? You mentioned that countries around the world are grappling with Google and grappling with the Australian model and C18. Legislation like C18. Can you expand on why C18 is specifically a good solution to many of the problems faced by other countries?
I think other countries have the same exact problem that you're facing in Canada, and they're coming up with similar solutions. And I know you've heard from Rod Sims, who has done this in Australia. The Australian model has a lot of lessons to be taken from it. You know, everybody faces the same problem, crisis in journalism. Everybody sees the same diagnosis, which is that monopoly in the digital advertising industry is a huge contributing factor to that crisis. And so they're looking for ways to intervene to make sure that the public gets journalism. I think that the C18 has going for it is it leans in the direction of greater transparency. I would argue for more. It leans in the direction of mandatory minimums for using funds to support the production of journalism. I would argue that those should be more explicit. And it leans in the direction of trying to make sure that every publisher, whether it's a small rural organization or a large urban organization, gets an equitable deal. Those are all important improvements on the Australian bill and things that I think can be clarified in this bill to make the Canadian law the world leader.
Thank you so much. Mr. Desjardins, are you a partner of Google?
Me personally, no. I do believe that there are some relationships between our members and Google. As I said, there's 700 members across the country, so it is difficult for me to nail down. But I do know that some have either entered into those negotiations. But I think one of the points that we're coming to is this idea that a link has value, and I think that the whole purpose of why we're here, what we're talking about with C18, is the fact that that link is creating more value to the global platforms than it is to the Canadian journalism organizations. And that is the discrepancy that we are trying to address here. So to say that, is there value with sending people to TVA Nouvelle or CTV News or Global or what have you, to my radio station members? Yes, there's value. But who is retaining the majority of that value? The majority of that value is being retained by the platforms.
Very quickly, do you think these quote-unquote partnerships would exist without the threat of C18 or the Australian model and other legislation across the country?
I would say, what I would say is that I think that where we want to get to is a place where all journalism organizations are entering into those partnerships as opposed to having a foreign platform choose the winners and losers in Canadian journalism.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. It's now my turn to ask a few questions. I think some very interesting points have been brought up. Mr. Miles, I'll come back to you. Let's talk about opting out, the option for a media player to not do business with a platform. A colleague of mine made a comparison. If someone wanted to get into the delivery business and decided to do so with a horse and cart instead of a truck, do media platforms have the choice to use or not use digital platforms?
Vous êtes en sourdine.
You're on mute.
Merci.
Thank you. We do have a choice. We're not forced into relationships with Google or Meta, etc. And if we choose to put our content on their platforms, it's because the discoverability factor that these platforms can give us is more than we would be able to bring ourselves. Every day we see our viewership numbers for subscribers and occasional viewers. Google has something very important, which is a keyword search. And when people type in ledevoir.com, it's very important. And we can't do without this. And someone else explained this very well. The value that is created in this relationship is very important because we can be complementary and be partners. Of course, there's an imbalance when so much ad revenue goes to the platform. I have a quick question because time is running out, and I really want for us to have enough time to finish the question round. There was also mention of professionalism and journalism quality. In C18, do you find that the criteria are not very well defined for what should be an accredited organization? Do you think more journalistic rules should be applied? Not at all. I think the question is how to help smaller businesses, news businesses, become qualified. But in the rules to become a QCJO, you find all arguments and answers. I would like to draw your attention to section 2.27, which says that news must be of general interest. Mr. Miles, using journalistic methods, so we are capable of distinguishing misinformation. Thank you very much, Mr. Miles. It's now Peter Julian's turn for 2.5 minutes.
Start with a comment the Financial Times reported just a few months ago, and the headline reads, "Australian media thrives after forcing big tech to pay for content." I mean, the judgment of what has happened in Australia, there is no doubt made a big difference in reviving the media sector. And I would note, Mr. Chair, that Country Press Australia did a terrific job of negotiating on behalf of smaller weeklies right across Australia. And that is a response, I think, to Mr. Jamieson's legitimate concern in making sure that Alberta papers, and we heard the same from Saskatchewan newspapers, that they support C18, but they want to make sure that more newspapers are able to benefit. So the reality is the question of principle of this bill, there is no doubt, all the evidence shows This will make a huge difference for media in this country. Our job as members of parliament is to make the bill better. And so I reject those around the table who would say, gosh, the bill's not perfect, so we have to oppose it. That's absurd. Our job is to make sure this bill is better. So I haven't had an opportunity yet to ask Mr. Scott and Mr. Miller, Mr. O'Brien, and I would like to compliment the team of CHCH. They do a great job in providing news not only in Greater Toronto, but right across the country. So thank you for your work. If you could take a moment just to talk about other amendments that this committee should be considering so that we can make C-18 a better bill. Well, we'll start with Mr. Scott.
Just briefly, I'll re-emphasize the points that I made in my opening comments. First, I think we got to make sure that deals are equitable for small and large news outlets alike. Second, we ought to make sure that new revenues are used for the production of news content and not for other business purposes. And third, we should increase transparency in all ways that are feasible under this legislation. At the very least, mandatory reporting by the CRTC on a more regular basis than annual. And if possible, aggregated market data so that new deals that are struck under the terms of this legislation by news organizations that don't have one yet can make informed decisions about whether they're settling for something that is similar to what other organizations are getting.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Julian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Julian. We have two other question rounds. First, Marilyn Gladue for the Conservatives. Please go ahead for 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses here today.
Because I'm new to the committee, I wanted to start with a sort of a comment so you can understand where I'm coming from. To me, freedom of the press is critical for democracy. In communistic states, the government controls the media so that it can be sure that its propaganda is the only thing people receive. And we definitely don't want to see anything like that in Canada. And so when I look at C-18, I have a couple of concerns. I see that here the government is the one that sets the criteria for who are the actual media organizations, and then the CRTC decides which outlets are going to receive the payment. That doesn't sound like freedom. And if I see that we're only focusing on general news, then that sort of distinguishes from targeted journalists. So again, I have a concern there. So let me go to my questions. My first question is for Google. You mentioned in your opening remarks about a term called undue preference. So I know that in social media, they use algorithms to basically theoretically try to help you. So when you're searching for something, you don't have to go through 5 pages of links before you find something that's actually what you're looking for. But I noticed that the language in the bill is trying to prevent, discrimination or undue sorting out of organizations, and it sounds like those two things are in conflict. Could you expand on your concern with undue preference?
Thank you for the question. And I think it's worth underlining that I'm here today to discuss, as other witnesses have, amendments that would make this bill better and to ensure that we support journalism in Canada as a society as well as a company and an industry. And our primary concern, as I discussed about undue preference, is that it is tied to this framework, and it is tied to an enforcement mechanism through the CRTC that is in effect a challenge to how commercial contracts are conducted and then how information is presented within our products and services. And through our evaluation, the real threat is that those challenges could come from not well-meaning actors and established participants in journalism in Canada, but those sort of edge cases and smaller organizations that may not even be based here that use this tool to seek the promotion and the raising of their content within the context of how information is presented to our users.
Okay, and you did also talk about some of the other places in the world that have implemented similar systems. And I think it's important to always try to learn from the mistakes of others or the learning experiences that they've had. So could you tell me what it is that you didn't like about the Australian system? And I think you also mentioned the German system, again, to Mr. McKay.
For the context of our conversation today, the Australian system produced the expected and desired result. There are contracts that have agreed upon terms with journalism organizations of all sizes. And the news out of Australia is that this is addressing the public policy challenge in that country. That should be the outcome of Bill C-18 that we're considering today. And our suggested amendments seek to resolve the undue and unintended consequences of those items that I've identified and other items that we'll include in our submission to the committee to follow shortly. In the context of other countries, what we see consistently is that if the enforcement mechanism is not thoroughly thought out and thought out in the context of bad actors, it ends up being gamed and misused by bad actors that has a negative consequence on the user experience and the discoverability of information, and then also acts in a contrary manner to the public policy goals of the legislation that was originally drafted. So we're very much in favor of this sort of conversation and continued deliberation about how to perfect C-18 to arrive at our shared goals.
Thank you. In fact, when we talk about the Australian situation, I noticed that at the beginning, Facebook, Meta, had actually blocked all the Australian content at the beginning, and I didn't see them in the list of witnesses, and there were a number of other witnesses I didn't see. So I'd like to make a motion that the committee have a minimum of 3 additional meetings to hear from witnesses on Bill C-18, with one of those meetings being with the Canadian Heritage Minister, and that the committee does not move to clause by clause until the completion of these 3 meetings.
Merci. Est-ce que vous voulez que...
Thank you. Do you wish for us to debate your motion starting now, Ms. Gladue?
Madame Gladue, vous avez
Ms. Gladue, the floor is yours.
Very good. Yes, I mean, I think that because freedom of the press...
Rappel au règlement, Monsieur Julien.
Point of order, Mr. Julian.
We saw this just before the break as well, Mr. Chair, where the Conservatives sabotaged the hearing so that we couldn't get final answers. I think it's profoundly disrespectful. There is still another member of our committee who wanted to ask questions, so I would ask Ms. Gladue simply to table her motion so that we can complete questioning the witnesses, and then we, of course, have committee business already scheduled.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Ms. Gladue. I would add that adding meetings will be part of our in-camera session after we finish with the witnesses. Do you think that we can just table your motion and discuss it later on?
The concern is that, we're going to go in camera, and so I want to hear the discussion in the public realm because I think we need to hear from the Canadian Heritage Minister. I think that is normal for bills that would come before a committee. And I also think that I'd like to see, Facebook, Meta come forward as well. And where's the CRTC?
D'accord. Alors,
Okay, so next on our list of speakers is Ms. Thomas, followed by Mr. Biddle, Mr. Julian, and I believe Mr. Waugh.
Madame Thomas.
Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. I guess first off, I just want to thank the witnesses for being here, and I do recognize that we are in the last 4-minute stretch of this meeting before moving on to committee business. The reason why it was so important to move this motion now, and I think we've been rather accommodating to the committee waiting until the last 4 minutes. But the reason why that's important is because, of course, there are discussions that can be had behind closed doors in camera in order to protect the identity of certain individuals, and that is appropriate. At the same time, there are other discussions that should take place in the public domain for the sake of accountability and transparency, and that is most appropriate. And so in this case, this one does call for a public discussion. The motion on the table, of course, is asking for 3 more meetings with regards to Bill C-18.
Madame Thomas, je me permets.
Ms. Thomas, if I may interrupt you, we do not have the text of the motion, so it's very difficult for us to follow you. Would it be possible for us to receive the text of the motion? Could you send it to the clerk, please?
Sure. I think we can make sure that that is sent to the clerk. Do you want me to pause until you receive it, Chair?
Non, vous pouvez continuer.
No, you may continue.
Thank you. Okay. So yes, we'll make sure that that gets to the clerk right away. But for the benefit of the committee, just to clarify, it's a pretty simple motion. Really, what we're asking for is a minimum of 3 more meetings with regards to Bill C-18. We're asking that the Minister of Heritage be a part of one of those meetings so that we would have an opportunity to hear from him with regard to this piece of legislation. We're asking that that take place before this committee move to clause-by-clause consideration of the bill. Fair enough? Okay. So I will continue to speak to that. I think we've seen a pattern in the past where pieces of legislation have been rushed through without due process. Bill C-11 was one such example, which, if successful, will have a significant impact on the virtual sphere. Bill C-18 will also have a significant impact on news outlets, on publishers, on media.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bittel.
Merci. It's almost 1 o'clock. Perhaps we can dismiss the witnesses.
Absolument.
Absolutely. Ms. Thomas, would you give me a moment to thank our witnesses? Since we have gotten into a different type of discussion, I would like to thank all of our witnesses sincerely for being with us today. You may be dismissed. Thank you all so much, and have a good day.
Madame Thomas, la parole est en.
You have the floor, Ms. Thomas.
Sorry, Chair, through you, if I may just draw attention for the clerk, just to my colleague who has his hand up. No,
He's behind the tall one,
Sorry.
right? So.
I just okay. Sure. So continuing, the point I really wish to raise is this: is that with such an important piece of legislation, I do believe that due process is necessary, and so we are asking for 3 more meetings. We're asking for the minister to come forward. That's been established. The reason for this that I would like to go into for just a moment here is this: we've seen in the past where important pieces of legislation have been rushed through the committee without due process, and important witnesses have not been heard from. In this case, Bill C-18 is absolutely pinnacle. It will forever change the way that news is potentially produced, but also how it's accessed. And there are many further considerations that need to be given attention. The way we can do that is by hearing from the several dozen witnesses that are still on the list that have not been called forward, and also from the minister. One of the reasons why it's so important that we hear from the minister is there's a few. One is we actually just in general haven't heard from him at this committee at all. So it would be normal for a minister to come forward and to speak to his mandate letter. It would be normal for a minister to come forward and speak to the estimates or the budget. And we haven't actually heard from the minister in that capacity. Specifically, the estimates seems like a really good reason for the minister to show up. On this piece of legislation, it would be appropriate for the minister to show up. And so my concern is that this committee is going to rush this process. And so to ensure that that is not the case, but rather that due time, due process is given, we are asking for the support and cooperation of the other members around this table to ensure that, as stated, a minimum of 3 meetings are given and that the minister is heard from. Further to that, I think one of the reasons why it is so important to hear from those other witnesses that are on the list is because a number of them, many of them, have written into the committee and asked for their voices to be heard. And it's in a nonpartisan capacity, so there's actually a huge opportunity here to engage in cooperation together. Further to that, yes, there is another list that is more partisan in nature. There are witnesses that Conservatives have put together. There are witnesses that Liberals have put together or put forward, NDP, the Bloc. And of course, that again is due process at a committee, that we would have the opportunity to put forward witnesses, but then that we would also have the opportunity to hear from those witnesses. Again, my concern is that without this motion, without giving some sort of direction or framework to the time we will spend on Bill C-18, my concern is that this bill will be rushed through without hearing from this slate of very important voices from all parties, with a variety of angles being held. And so, again, for this reason, we would move this motion.
Merci, Madame Thomas.
Thank you, Madame Thomas. Mr. Biddle.
So much, Mr. Chair, and it's disappointing again that we're in this spot where the Conservatives are filibustering. This is an important piece of legislation, and we've heard the numbers in terms of media outlets closing, and further delay on this bill can be perilous to media outlets. The minister is eager to testify, but we need to go into committee business to talk about other issues, including Hockey Canada, sports in general, and I think that needs to be done in a way that we originally scheduled it. The minister will testify. The minister is eager to testify and has done so before. Ms. Thomas may not remember because she filibustered through it the last time he appeared. But I move that debate on this motion be adjourned.
I'll suspend for a second to have this chat with the clerk on this one. Just give me a few seconds.
Alors, la motion qui est sur la table présentement, qui...
The motion will come to a standing vote. Should we proceed to the adjournment of the meeting then? Sorry, adjourning the debate, rather. Sorry, adjourning the debate. I'm new to this. Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Gillian. Madam Clerk, you have the floor.
Mr. Biddle? Mr. Coteau? Ms. Hefner? Mr. Housefather?
Oui, en faveur.
Mr. Lewis?
In favor.
Ms. Gladue? Ms. Thomas?
No.
Mr. Shields?
No.
Mr. Waugh?
No.
Mr. Julian?
En faveur.
Alors, 6 en faveur.
6 yeas, 4 nays. So we'll resume our discussions on the agenda. Just give me 1 second.
Merci de votre...
Thank you for your patience, everyone. I clearly need Amy here to move ahead. So I would propose a short break so we can move in camera and then proceed to our business, given that we have a few items on the agenda and that we have the full stop at 1:30, Madam Thomas.
I would propose a motion that we actually stay in public for the business portion of this meeting rather than going in camera.
Est-ce que quelqu'un...
Does everyone agree that, or do we vote on this one? Mr. Julian.
In this particular circumstance, given that we're talking about sensitive information from Hockey Canada and from other sports organizations and other victims who have contacted us, I oppose the idea of providing those names and that information in public. I think we have to be very careful and prudent given the information that all of us have received. I believe that it is appropriate to have this discussion in camera.
Madame Gladu. Madame Gladu, je dois vous interrompre.
I'll have to interrupt you, Madame Gladu. This is not a matter for debate. We'll have to vote directly on the motion. So all those that are for this motion moving to in camera, is that correct, that we would be moving to in camera? All right. So the question is, it's the opposite, actually. Does the meeting remain in public? That's the question. Madam Clerk, you have the floor.
Il n'y a pas de débat, Monsieur Roy.
It's not debatable. We're going to the vote. Mr. Wall.
Mr. Biddle, the question is, will we remain in public for the meeting? Mr. Godot?
No.
Ms. Hefner?
Against.
Mr. Housefather?
No.
Mr. Lewis?
Against.
Ms. Gladu?
Yes.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Shields?
Yes.
Mr. Waugh?
Yes.
Mr. Julian?
No.
Six non, 4 oui.
6 nays, 4 yeas. We will suspend and move in camera. Thank you.